March 14th, 2026, 4:47 a.m. Kupiansk sector, eastern Ukraine. 6 Russian Tu-S-19 Mesta-S self-propelled howitzers sit beneath thermal camouflage netting in a tree line 4 kilometers behind the front. They've been firing for 3 straight days. 72 hours of relentless 152mm shells raining down on Ukrainian defensive positions along the Oskil River. Ukrainian infantry in those trenches have counted over 400 incoming rounds. 3 soldiers wounded. 2 fighting positions collapsed. Communications equipment shattered by near misses. But at 4:47 a.m., a Ukrainian drone reconnaissance operator sitting in a basement 12 kilometers away notices something on his thermal display. A single hotspot. Faint, but unmistakable. One of the Mesta-S crews left an engine idling, probably to keep the hydraulic turret traverse warm in the -8-degree temperatures. That one running engine is about to cost Russia 6 howitzers, 4 ammunition carriers, an estimated 23 crew members, and roughly $40 million in equipment, all of it gone in 8 minutes. I'm your host at Warfist TV, where we analyze the battles that change wars. And today we're breaking down one of the most devastating coordinated FPV drone strikes of the entire conflict. An operation that silenced an entire artillery sector and proved once again that Ukraine doesn't just fight a war. Ukraine reinvents how wars are fought. Let's rewind 72 hours before those drones launched. March 11th, 2026. The Kupiansk axis has been one of the most contested sectors in eastern Ukraine for months. Russian forces operating under the banner of the Western Military District's reformed grouping have been attempting slow, grinding advances south of the city. Their objective is straightforward: push Ukrainian forces back from the Oskil River crossings and establish fire control over the main supply routes feeding Ukrainian positions to the south. To support this push, Russian commanders deployed a battery of 6 Tu-S-19 Msta-S self-propelled howitzers. This is not a trivial asset. The Msta-S is the backbone of Russian divisional artillery. Each unit weighs 42 tons. It carries a 152mm Tu-A64 gun, capable of firing at ranges up to 24 kilometers with standard ammunition and up to 29 kilometers with rocket-assisted projectiles. Rate of fire, 7 to 8 rounds per minute. Each round carries a high explosive fragmentation warhead weighing over 43 kilograms. 6 of these howitzers firing together can deliver over 40 rounds per minute onto a target area. That's nearly 2,000 kilograms of high explosive landing every 60 seconds. For the Ukrainian infantry on the receiving end, the effect is devastating. Not just physically, but psychologically. The constant shelling makes resupply nearly impossible, rotation of troops dangerous, and sleep a distant memory. Which weapon was deadlier in this engagement? A. The FPV drones. B. The secondary ammunition explosions. C. The psychological collapse of the Russian crews. Comment below with your answer. By March 13th, Ukrainian battalion commanders along the Oskil line had submitted multiple urgent requests to higher command. The shelling was degrading their defensive capability. Counter-battery radar had identified the approximate firing positions, but the Russians were smart. They displaced after every major fire mission, never staying in one location for more than 4 hours. Traditional counter-battery fire with M777 howitzers had been attempted twice. Both times, the shells landed on empty positions. The Mesta-S battery had already moved. This is the paradox of modern artillery warfare. A well-disciplined battery that shoots and scoots is incredibly difficult to destroy with conventional counter-battery fire. The time between detecting a firing position, calculating coordinates, transmitting them, and delivering return fire can be 8 to 12 minutes. A trained Mesta-S crew can pack up and displace in under 5. The Russians knew this, and for 72 hours, it worked. But Ukrainian commanders weren't relying solely on counter-battery radar. They had another asset: a dedicated drone reconnaissance team operating a fleet of long-endurance surveillance drones equipped with thermal imaging payloads. These aren't the small commercial quadcopters that have become ubiquitous on the front line. These are fixed-wing platforms capable of loitering at altitudes above 2,000 meters for 6 to 8 hours, scanning vast areas of terrain with infrared sensors that can detect vehicle engines, human body heat, and even the thermal bloom of recently fired artillery tubes. The team had been tasked with finding this battery since March 12th. For over 30 hours, operators rotated in shifts, flying overlapping search patterns across a 15-kilometer-wide band of territory behind Russian lines. They checked tree lines, farm buildings, ravines, and abandoned villages. The Russians had chosen their positions well: dense canopy, thermal camouflage netting draped over each vehicle, and strict light and heat discipline. During daylight hours, nothing moved, no engines ran. Crews stayed beneath their vehicles or in dugouts. But war is a game of patience. And at 4:47 a.m. on March 14th, patience paid off. The thermal camera picked up a single heat signature. It was small, barely above the ambient temperature of the surrounding vegetation. But it was consistent. Not a human, not an animal. The thermal profile matched the exhaust vent of a diesel engine running at idle. The operator zoomed in. Through the canopy gaps, the outline of a large tracked vehicle became faintly visible. He marked the coordinates. Then he expanded his search pattern around that point. Within 12 minutes, he had identified 5 more thermal anomalies within a 300-meter radius, vehicles that weren't running, but whose metal hulls still radiated slightly differently than the surrounding trees in the pre-dawn cold. The battery's camouflage was excellent against visual and even some thermal detection. But one running engine had compromised the entire position. Stay with me, because what happens in the next 8 minutes destroys an entire artillery battery and changes the tactical situation on a 20-kilometer stretch of front line. The reconnaissance operator transmitted the coordinates to the drone strike unit. This unit, their call sign is classified, but Ukrainian social media has referred to elements of this group as part of the broader unmanned systems forces that Ukraine formally established in early 2025 had been on standby for exactly this kind of mission. They had 18 FPV drones prepared, armed, charged, and ready. 18 drones. Let that number register. Each one cost between $300 and $800 to build. The total investment in this strike package was roughly $9,000 in airframes and munitions. They were about to destroy equipment worth over $40 million. That's a cost exchange ratio of more than 4,000 to 1. This is why FPV drones have fundamentally rewritten the economics of ground warfare. A single Ukrainian operator with a pair of goggles and a controller can destroy a vehicle that took a Russian factory months to build and costs millions to replace. Russia cannot win this math. Nobody can. The strike plan was methodical. 3 waves of 6 drones each. The first wave would target the ammunition supply vehicles, the Ural 4320 trucks, and the dedicated ammunition carriers that every MST-S battery keeps nearby to sustain its rate of fire. Each howitzer typically has 1 to 2 tons of ammunition staged within 50 meters. Hit the ammunition first, and you create secondary explosions that do half the work for you. The blast and fire illuminate the remaining targets for waves 2 and 3. The second wave would hit the howitzers themselves. The MST-S is armored. It has up to 15 millimeters of steel plating on the hull, enough to stop shell fragments and small arms fire. But FPV drones don't care about that armor. They're precision weapons. They fly directly into the open hatches, the engine deck vents, or the thin armor on the turret roof. A shaped charge warhead detonating on the engine deck of a MST-S will penetrate easily, igniting fuel and hydraulic fluid. The third wave was the insurance. Any vehicle still intact, any crew attempting to flee, any ammunition that hadn't cooked off, the third wave would finish the job. 4:53 a.m., 6 minutes after the initial thermal detection. The first wave launched. 6 FPV drones lifted off simultaneously from a concealed position approximately 8 kilometers from the Russian battery. At cruise speed, they covered the distance in under 4 minutes. The operators flew them low, 15 to 30 meters above the ground, following terrain contours to avoid detection by any Russian electronic warfare systems in the area. Russian EW capability in this sector was known to include at least one Pol 21 jamming system and several handheld anti-drone guns. But the Pol 21 is primarily effective against GPS-guided drones. FPV drones don't use GPS. They're manually piloted through a direct video link. The operator sees what the drone sees and flies it by hand, in real time, all the way to impact. Jamming GPS does nothing. You'd need to jam the specific video frequency, and even then, modern Ukrainian FPV units hop frequencies rapidly, making consistent jamming extremely difficult. The Russian crews had no warning. 4:57 a.m. The first drone struck. It hit an ammunition carrier, a Ural 4 320 truck loaded with 152mm shells parked under camouflage netting approximately 40 meters from the nearest howitzer. The shaped charge warhead detonated against the truck's cargo bed. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then, the propellant charges in the stored ammunition ignited. The explosion was enormous. Over a ton of artillery propellant and high explosive shells detonating simultaneously produced a fireball that rose above the tree line. The thermal camouflage netting, synthetic material designed to mask heat signatures, caught fire instantly, adding thick black smoke to the inferno. The blast waves shredded nearby vegetation and knocked down small trees within a 30-meter radius. 14 seconds later, the second drone hit a second ammunition cache, 50 meters to the east, another massive secondary explosion. The Russian position was now illuminated by two raging fires, the thermal camouflage completely defeated, every vehicle in the battery visible in both thermal and visual spectrums. How many total vehicles did Ukraine destroy in this 8-minute strike? A. 6, B. 10, C. 12. The answer is at the end of this video. Drones 3 through 6 of the first wave struck in rapid succession. 2 more ammunition carriers destroyed. A command vehicle, likely a mobile fire control post used to coordinate the battery's targeting, took a direct hit through its roof-mounted antenna array. The 6th drone of the first wave hit a MSTS howitzer directly on its engine deck. The engine deck of the MSTS is its most vulnerable point from above. The armor there is thinnest, designed to stop fragments, not direct attack. The FPV drone's warhead punched through the deck plating and detonated inside the engine compartment. Diesel fuel ignited. The hydraulic system, which powers the gun's traverse and elevation, ruptured, spraying flammable fluid across the interior. Within seconds, the vehicle was engulfed in flames. Its ammunition, stored in the automatic loader beneath the turret, began cooking off in a chain of explosions that blew the turret partially off its ring. 5 minutes into the attack, the Russian battery was in chaos. Intercepted radio communications, later published by Ukrainian military intelligence, captured the moments after the first impacts. The battery commander was screaming for his crews to evacuate vehicles and disperse into the tree line. But the fires from the ammunition explosions had turned the position into an inferno. Camouflage netting was burning everywhere. Smoke made visibility near zero. And the crews didn't know how many drones were still incoming. They were right to be afraid. 5:01 a.m. The second wave launched, 6 more FPV drones. These operators had the advantage of the fires now illuminating the target area. Through their cameras, the remaining MSTS howitzers were clearly visible, dark silhouettes against the orange glow of burning vehicles. The operators didn't even need to switch to thermal imaging. The targets were lit up like a stage. The second wave was systematic, each drone assigned to a specific howitzer. The operators communicated through a shared channel, deconflicting their approach paths to avoid collisions or wasted strikes on already destroyed vehicles. Drone 7 hit the second MSTS through its open commander's hatch. The crew had been attempting to start the engine and drive out of the position. They never made it. The warhead detonated inside the turret. The crew, likely 3 or 4 soldiers, were eliminated instantly. Drone 8 struck the third howitzer on its left flank, just above the road wheels. The shaped charge penetrated the hull and ignited internal ammunition. Another catastrophic explosion. Another turret blown off. Subscribe to Warfist TV if you want to understand how modern warfare actually works. Because this isn't a movie. This is how wars are decided. In the dark, by operators wearing goggles, flying machines that cost less than a used car. Drone 9 targeted a howitzer whose crew had abandoned it and were running through the trees. The operator made a decision. Hit the vehicle, not the fleeing crew. The drone slammed into the engine compartment at over 100 kilometers per hour. The MSTS lurched as the warhead detonated, then began burning from the rear forward. 42 tons of steel, rendered into scrap by a drone that weighed less than 2 kilograms. Drone 10 found the fourth MSTS already partially damaged by blast fragments from the ammunition explosions. Its camouflage netting was on fire, and one of its road wheels had been sheared off by shrapnel. The drone hit its center mass on the turret. Ammunition cooked off within 30 seconds. Drone 11 struck the fifth howitzer. This one had actually managed to start its engine. The driver was attempting to reverse out of the tree line onto a dirt track leading east. The The drone operator adjusted course, tracking the moving vehicle for 6 seconds before impacting the front hull just below the driver's position. The vehicle stopped. Smoke poured from every opening. Drone 12 hit an additional vehicle, a support truck, attempting to flee the position. The truck, loaded with communications equipment and spare parts, detonated in a smaller but still impressive explosion. Its cargo scattered across the dirt road. 5:05 a.m., 8 minutes since the first thermal detection. The position was a graveyard. But the Ukrainian operators weren't finished. The third wave, the insurance wave, launched at 5:03 a.m. 6 more drones screaming toward the target area. Their mission: confirm destruction and eliminate any surviving equipment or reorganizing crews. Drone 13 through 15 struck the remaining Mystay S, the 6th howitzer, which had been partially obscured behind a collapsed tree and had avoided the first 2 waves. 2 drones hit it in quick succession, one on the turret and one on the engine deck. The vehicle burned. Drone 16 found a group of Russian soldiers approximately 200 meters from the main position, huddled in a drainage ditch. The operator reported their position to command but did not engage. The priority was vehicles, not dismounted infantry. This restraint is characteristic of Ukrainian drone doctrine. Personnel can surrender or retreat. A $40 million battery cannot. Drones 17 and 18 conducted a final sweep of the area. They found no intact vehicles. Every Mystay S was burning or had already been reduced to a blackened hull. The ammunition carriers were craters. The command vehicle was unrecognizable. 5:05 a.m., 8 minutes from first impact to last. The strike was complete. If you believe tactics win wars, type Warfist TV in the comments. Because what you just heard wasn't luck. It was doctrine, preparation, and execution at a level that most armies in the world cannot match. Let me give you the full damage assessment. 62S-19 Mesta S self-propelled howitzers, destroyed. Each one valued at approximately $5 to $6 million depending on variant and condition. That's $30 to $36 million in howitzers alone. 4 ammunition and supply vehicles, destroyed, including an estimated 8 to 12 tons of 152mm ammunition that detonated in secondary explosions, ammunition that Russia cannot easily replace, much of it believed to be from stockpiles supplemented by North Korean shipments, given the degraded state of Russia's domestic production capacity. 1 mobile command and fire control vehicle, destroyed. This vehicle coordinated targeting data from forward observers, counter-battery radar, and higher command to the individual howitzers. Its loss means the battery couldn't function even if the guns had survived. 1 support vehicle, destroyed. Communications equipment, spare parts, maintenance tools, the logistical tail that keeps a battery operational. Total vehicles destroyed, 12. Estimated Russian personnel casualties, between 18 and 28. Ukrainian military intelligence assessed that a full Mystay S battery complement includes approximately 36 personnel, 6 crews of 4 to 5 soldiers each, plus support personnel. Given that several crews were outside their vehicles when the second and third waves hit, and given the intercepted communications suggesting at least some soldiers survived and fled into the tree line, the casualty estimate accounts for both those killed inside vehicles and those caught in secondary explosions and shrapnel. The total equipment loss is valued at approximately $38 to $45 million, destroyed by roughly $9,000 worth of FPV drones. Let me state that ratio again. For every dollar Ukraine spent on this strike, Russia lost over $4,000 in equipment. This is not sustainable for any military. Russia's defense industry, despite wartime mobilization, produces an estimated 6 to 10 Mystay S howitzers per month, a fraction of the losses being inflicted across the entire front. When a single drone unit can destroy a month's production in 8 minutes, the math of attrition warfare fundamentally breaks. But the material damage was only half the story. The tactical impact on the front line was immediate and dramatic. Ukrainian infantry positions along the Oskil River in the Kupiansk sector reported that Russian artillery fire on their positions dropped to 0 within 1 hour of the strike. Not reduced. 0. The guns that had been hammering them for 72 straight hours fell completely silent. That silence lasted 48 hours. For soldiers who had endured 3 days of constant shelling, the ground shaking, the air splitting, the ever-present fear that the next round would land directly in your trench, 48 hours of silence was transformative. Resupply convoys that had been delayed for days finally moved forward. Wounded soldiers were evacuated. Fresh troops rotated in. Damaged fighting positions were rebuilt and reinforced. One Ukrainian platoon commander, quoted in a report circulated on Ukrainian military social media channels, said simply, "We heard nothing for 2 days. We slept. Some of us slept for the first time in a week." That single statement captures something that casualty figures and equipment tallies cannot. The human dimension of what those 18 FPV drones achieved. They didn't just destroy metal and explosives. They gave exhausted soldiers rest. They gave a battered defensive line time to recover. They gave commanders the breathing room to reorganize. And they sent a message to Russian artillery units across the entire sector. You are not hidden. You are not safe. Your camouflage nets and shoot and scoot tactics will not save you. A single thermal signature, one engine left running for warmth, and everything you have disappears in 8 minutes. The Russian response to this strike was telling. Intercepted communications from higher command, likely brigade or division level, showed a mixture of fury and confusion. A senior officer berated the battery commander, who survived the attack, for what he called elementary failures in thermal discipline. The battery commander, in turn, blamed the cold weather for necessitating engine idling and the lack of dedicated electronic warfare coverage for failing to detect the incoming drones. This blame game is itself a symptom of a deeper Russian problem. Their doctrine still struggles to integrate counter-drone defense at the tactical level. At the strategic level, Russia has invested heavily in electronic warfare systems like Krasuka-4 and Murmansk-BN. But these are large, expensive, scarce systems designed to jam major platforms at long range. At the battery level, the level where FPV drones actually attack, Russian units often have nothing more than a few handheld jammers and the vigilance of their sentries. Against a pre-dawn coordinated swarm attack, sentries are nearly useless. The drones approach at low altitude, at high speed, with minimal acoustic and radar signature. By the time a sentry hears the distinctive whine of an FPV motor, impact is seconds away. And handheld jammers, even when activated in time, work against only specific frequency bands. Ukrainian drone units have adapted by using frequency hopping protocols, directional antennas, and fiber optic control links that are essentially immune to radio frequency jamming. This is the technological arms race of the Ukraine-Russia war playing out in real time. Russia deploys a countermeasure. Ukraine adapts. Russia adjusts. Ukraine innovates again. And in March 2026, the innovation curve still favors Ukraine. Not because Ukraine has more money or more factories, but because Ukraine has a decentralized, adaptive military culture where a 23-year-old drone operator can propose a new tactic, test it the same week, and see it adopted across the force within a month. What would NATO have done differently in this scenario? Would a Western military have used manned aircraft, cruise missiles, or a completely different approach? Comment your analysis below. Russia's military culture, by contrast, remains top-down, rigid, and slow to adapt. Decisions about drone tactics get filtered through layers of command. Innovation is punished as often as it's rewarded. The result is a force that is quantitatively large, but qualitatively sluggish, always reacting, rarely anticipating. The Kupiansk battery strike is a textbook example of this asymmetry. The Russian battery did almost everything right by traditional artillery doctrine. They displaced regularly, they used camouflage, they maintained fire discipline during daylight. In any war before 2022, they would have been nearly impossible to find and destroy. But this is not any war before 2022. This is the first major conflict where cheap, mass-produced, operator-guided kamikaze drones are a primary strike weapon. The rules have changed, and Ukraine is writing the new rulebook. Let's talk about the broader implications, because what happened near Kupiansk on March 14, 2026 is not an isolated event. It's part of a pattern that has been accelerating throughout the winter of 2025 and into early 2026. Ukrainian drone units have refined their swarm tactics significantly since the early days of the war. In 2022 and 2023, FPV drone strikes were mostly individual attacks. One drone, one target. Effective, but limited in scope. A single FPV drone can destroy a single vehicle, but it can't neutralize an entire position. By late 2024, Ukrainian units had begun experimenting with coordinated multi-drone strikes. 3 to 5 drones launched simultaneously against a single high-value target, ensuring redundancy. If one drone was jammed or missed, the others would complete the mission. By mid-2025, the concept evolved further. Units began planning sequential wave attacks. Multiple groups of drones launched in timed intervals, each wave with a specific tactical objective. First wave suppresses air defense or targets ammunition. Second wave hits primary targets. Third wave conducts battle damage assessment and finishes surviving equipment. The March 14th strike near Kupiansk represents the maturation of this doctrine. 18 drones in 3 waves, each wave with defined targets, operators deconflicting approach paths in real time. The entire operation from first thermal detection to last impact completed in under 10 minutes. This is not improvisation. This is a formalized combined arms operation, except the arms are $300 airframes controlled by soldiers wearing VR goggles. Military analysts across NATO have taken notice. The United States Marine Corps published an unclassified assessment in February 2026, noting that Ukrainian FPV swarm tactics represent a fundamental shift in the relationship between cost and lethality in ground warfare. The British Royal United Services Institute published a similar analysis, concluding that any future peer conflict will feature mass employment of autonomous and semi-autonomous loitering munitions at the tactical level. Ukraine isn't just fighting a war. Ukraine is inventing the future of warfare, and every military on Earth is watching. Real tactics, real consequences. War Fist TV. Now let me answer the question I posed earlier. How many total vehicles did Ukraine destroy in this 8-minute strike? The answer is C, 12. 6 2S-19 EMSTA-S self-propelled howitzers, 4 ammunition and supply vehicles, 1 mobile command vehicle, and 1 support truck. 12 vehicles destroyed, approximately $40 million in equipment eliminated, and an entire artillery battery rendered combat ineffective, all by 18 FPV drones costing a combined $9,000. 3 questions to consider. Was the decision to prioritize ammunition carriers in the first wave the right tactical choice? Some might argue that hitting the howitzers first would have immediately stopped the shelling. But the Ukrainian planners understood that ammunition explosions would illuminate the remaining targets and cause additional destruction through secondary effects. The ammunition-first approach multiplied the impact of the first wave and made subsequent waves more effective. Was that the optimal choice? Or would you have done it differently? Could the Russian battery have prevented this? The root cause was a single engine left running in freezing temperatures. Strict thermal discipline, no engines running, period, regardless of crew comfort, would have denied the Reconnaissance drone its initial detection. But soldiers are human. -8 degrees is brutally cold. The decision to idle an engine was made by a crew member choosing warmth over concealment. In the arithmetic of war, that choice cost 6 howitzers and 24 lives. What would you have done as the Ukrainian drone commander? 18 drones was the entire available strike package. There was no reserve. If the attack had been partially successful, say only 3 howitzers destroyed, there would have been nothing left for a follow-up strike. Was committing all 18 drones at once the right call? Or should the commander have held 6 in reserve? What's your analysis? Subscribe to War Fist TV, because we break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. Real battles, real tactics, real consequences. The tree line near Kupiansk is quiet now. The fires burned themselves out by noon on March 14th. Satellite imagery taken 2 days later shows 6 blackened vehicle hulls, scattered craters where ammunition detonated, and scorched earth stretching 100 meters in every direction. The thermal camouflage netting is gone, melted into the soil. The trees that once provided concealment are stripped bare, their branches shattered by blast waves. The Ukrainian infantry along the Oskil River held their positions. The silence lasted 48 hours before Russian guns elsewhere in the sector resumed sporadic fire. But the battery that had tormented them for 3 days was gone, permanently. Somewhere behind Ukrainian lines, 18 drone operators powered down their equipment, logged their strike reports, and began charging batteries for the next mission. No medals, no headlines. Just professionals doing their work in a war that punishes hesitation and rewards precision. The wrecks remain in that tree line. silent monuments to a simple truth. In modern warfare, concealment is temporary, camouflage is perishable, and one thermal signature is all it takes. Stay vigilant.